Welcome. Welcome if you're online. I'm still not used to having a camera in front of my face. So you should know we really value you because there's a camera in front of my face. We do bless you, and we pray that you were able to experience some of what we just did. It was beautiful. We are starting a new series called Close Enough to Hear, and the idea is that there were 7 we call them words, but they're really like sentences Jesus said while he hung on the cross. And so we're starting a series. We're this series is this is like in Sesame Street where like they say the hard things, you know. This is where it's like a discipleship moment. This is even for me as I was preparing, you know, these are some of the passages in Scripture I kind of like to gloss over. Oh, Jesus' trial. Yeah, we know what happened. We know the end. So let's just skip all of this hard. And this is a series that's kind of forcing us to slow down and to look at the hard. So I'm just inviting you into it, knowing that this is not necessarily like feel-good Jesus time. This is like Jesus will remake you time and bring not just like, for me, like don't just bring happy Karen. It's time to bring broken Karen and put broken Karen at the foot of the cross. So I just invite you to do that. I know everybody's in a different place, and that's fine. But the depth is there if you're ready to go deeper. The invitation's there. We also sometimes talk about a lullaby effect with some of these stories that many of us have heard kind of over and over and over again. And I'm just praying that the lullaby effect doesn't take over and that the Spirit really speaks to us in this series. In order for us to really get a grasp of how Christ is speaking these words, we're going to start by talking about Jesus' physical experience in his trial and his resurrection and his death. So some of it gets pretty poignant, and this is kind of the warning. So we're going to talk about his physical experience, and then we're going to talk about his first word, his first sentence, and what it means. And then we're going to talk about his call to us. So in order to understand kind of the weight of the words, here is some of what Jesus went through. And I also wanted to share with you that I came to the study of Holy Week as a different person than I came to the study of Holy Week years ago. I came asking, can Christ really empathize with the hardest things people are going through? I came with the orphans that I met in Kenya in mind. I came to this story with a deeper understanding of American slavery and colonialism. I came with friends who have gone through terrible divorces and have been broken by the process. I came with friends now so single that they've been single up until my age, and they know they won't have kids now. I came with more life experience. And as I came with it, I think I have more work to do, honestly. But I do think what Christ went through was excruciating. And I do think that he can sympathize with anything we go through in this life. So I wanted to start with, Jesus starts in a garden. If you want to follow along, I'm not putting a lot of scriptures up today, but a lot of this story takes place in the Gospel of Matthew, chapters 26 and 27. So if you want to pull out your phone app, that's fine. But it starts, there's different places to start the story, but we're going to start it in the garden. And Jesus has asked his friends, the disciples, to stay up and pray with him. And the scripture actually tells us in Matthew 26:38 that his soul was deeply grieved to the point of death. And the text tells us that he started sweating drops of blood, which I'm told by a biologist that this is an actual physical condition that can happen. It's called hematohidrosis. And not only do you sweat blood, it mixes with your sweat, but it also results in very sensitive skin. So when I came with my friends who suffer so deeply from anxiety to this text, anxiety is what causes this medical condition. So if you are someone who suffers with anxiety, I want you to know that Jesus knows what that's like to the point of sweating blood. And when you are next in a space of anxiety, I just invite you to invite Jesus to it. Because sometimes we leave Jesus separate from our mental health stuff. But I think there's an invitation here to let Jesus in, to recognize that Jesus knows what you're going through. The next thing we find in Matthew 26:68 is that the temple guards spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists, and some slapped him. So he's experiencing, and these are from the temple guards, the place where he taught day in and day out. That's what the text says. These are people he would recognize, and they are spitting in his face. So I think about that betrayal that happens between friends or happens between loved ones. And I think, yes, Jesus knows of betrayal, not only from his friend Judas betraying him, but he knows the betrayal of a regular person in his life turning against him. Matthew 26:59, it says, they were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so that he could be put to death. Even though they found many who agreed to give false witness, they could not use anyone's testimony. So there were many people who were willing to lie about what Jesus had been doing in order to put him to death. Now, the reason why they couldn't use a lot of those testimonies was that they were testimonies that showed that Jesus was blaspheming, but that was not a reason to kill somebody for the Roman government. And the Jewish people couldn't kill people. They had to find a reason that would convince the Roman leaders to do the job. And that's what they were looking for. So if you've ever had somebody willing to lie about you or things that you've done, Jesus understands. Jesus has been there. So what happens is they brought Jesus to Pilate, who was like the governor of Judea, the local area. And Pilate figured out that Jesus was a Galilean, which was further north. So he's like, oh, I don't have to try this person. I can send him to his own governor, and his own governor can have responsibility for that. So he found out they didn't actually have to send Jesus up to Galilee, which would have been a long trip. He could send him across the city because Herod, Antipas was in town. So Jesus had to travel to Herod Antipas, and Herod pretty much figured out the same thing, that Jesus, there wasn't enough reason to kill him. So Herod sends him back. Now, this bit about Herod reminds us that there was systemic injustice in Jesus' life. Does anybody remember when Jesus was born? This was in the early story, like Christmas story, but we never preach this part on Christmas Eve, definitely not. But so Herod Antipas, this governor, his dad, he called for all of the young children, 2 and under, all the boys in the land to be killed. And that was a reason why Mary and Joseph took Jesus as refugees to, anybody remember where? Egypt. Egypt has been collecting refugees for a very long time. So when I came with my baby understanding of systemic injustice, I thought, okay, well, Jesus was part of that too. Not only that, but I mean, our Jewish friends can bear witness to the systemic injustice endures for that community. They still face it every day. They walk in this world with a different kind of fear than I do. So Pilate says to the people, listen, Jesus hasn't done enough to warrant death. And as you know, the story goes, they demanded it. And so Pilate orders Jesus be flogged. And this was a part of every crucifixion. The crucifixion, it gets pretty cool. I hope we can circle back to some of this stuff. It was created by the Persians in 300, 400 BC, so before Christ, or before the Common Era, as we're using that now. But there's a Psalm 22. You really want to do some homework for Lent. Read Psalm 22. Psalm 22 anticipates so much of this suffering Jesus goes through on the cross. And it was written before crucifixion was even a thing. Jesus refers to Psalm 22 through this story. Now, the flogging, it's whipping, and this is one of the more graphic things. It actually says that there's metal balls on the whip, and it's not one whip as we see maybe in the Western movies. It has many pieces of leather at the end of it, and then they would often attach like sheep bones to it. So remember, Jesus' skin is very sensitive because of this hematohidrosis. And then they would be whipped naked, so he would have been naked, and they would have whipped him from his shoulders down to his upper thighs. And we know because people have done this research that this would have been very effective in just tearing off of his flesh. And he would have lost a lot of blood. But there's more. They also place a crown of thorns on his head, and it's not rosebush thorns. They're like this big. And then it says in Matthew 27:30, and then they hit Jesus on the head. And if you have any sort of accident-prone kids, or you're accident-prone like myself, you know that heads tend to bleed a lot. So he's losing blood on his head, he's losing blood on his back. And so we can assume that he's suffering from a severe blood loss. One scientist says he's probably in shock, and he's physically unable to carry the crossbeam of the cross. We know that it probably wasn't an entire cross like you see in some passion plays. I don't know if you've ever been a part of one, but it was the crossbeam that they had people carry. And detail of this story is that they saw Simon of Cyrene, and they asked Simon of Cyrene to carry the cross. Does anybody know where Cyrene is? Cyrene's North Africa. Now, Simon may have been a Jewish settler of North Africa. We know that the diaspora spread out that way. But my guess is his clothes was probably different. And I think they saw a foreigner. And they decided to have the foreigner do the hard work of carrying the cross. I mean, people are peopling. People have a nature that takes advantage of people who are different, and you see it in the scriptures over and over again. So in addition to the whipping, something that really struck me was talking about the nails in his wrists. We know that the nails went through his wrists, not his hands, because his hands would just tear out. Because there's scientists who have done this research on cadavers. And the thing is, I guess I had become lullabied to this. You know, when you see pictures of Jesus on the cross, he often looks like he's sleeping, because they're pictures or jewelry even after he's gone. So he's relaxed, but the nails went through major nerves. I mean, major nerves. And I flinch when the dentist slips. So once they're nailed in through their wrists, then they're hoisted on the upright beam that stays in the ground. And then they nail the feet, which also has major nerves there, and it would shoot up through his legs. Now, one of the things that struck me the most, the scientist was talking about the diaphragm. And when the body is stretched, the diaphragm drops. But in order for you actually need the diaphragm to come up to get air out. And when you speak, are you exhaling or inhaling? You're exhaling. So these 7 words, these 7 sentences of Jesus, he would have had to do this work of pushing up on his feet to get the words out. And as I've been reading these words, I'm just realizing I can't believe Jesus was able to stay present to his surroundings, even in the midst of it. I mean, I'm sure that I would disassociate. I mean, but he somehow was able, valued people so much, valued his loved ones that were around, valued the ones who had gone away, that he got these words out. So we're going to listen to the words, the first words he spoke. And these are the words, well, I won't give it away.
I have seen him heal the sick, calm storms on the sea, and raise the dead. Crowds hung on his words like they were nourishment to the soul. I was there when Moses and Elijah appeared as he revealed his glory. but nothing caught my attention like that moment when he stood upon the nails in his feet, drew a ragged breath, and then prayed in raspy words.
Father, forgive them. They have no idea what they're doing.
I never thought I'd hear mercy from a cross.
So this is actually a script Pastor Mike wrote, and we were able to create this in-house, which blows my mind. Yay for a lead pastor who's still creating things. Whoop, whoop. So we're going to do a little work together on this passage. I have 3 questions for us. Who does Jesus address? Who is Jesus addressing in this prayer? It's in bold behind me. Father. Why doesn't he just say, I forgive you? I think most of us assume that because Jesus is praying that the Father would forgive his murderers, we'll come back to that Jesus has already done the forgiveness work. But you know, the word forgive actually comes from words that mean letting go, canceling a debt. Could it be that Jesus isn't quite ready to let it go? Maybe the I forgive you comes later. We'll circle back to that. What does he pray for? He prays for the forgiveness of his murderers. He's definitely talking about those who were the executioners, and it was their job to kill people to put food on their tables. Why? Why did Jesus pray for their forgiveness? I think he actually believed what he said. In Matthew 5, he says, "You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous." I think he really believed this. He really believed that God's kingdom was not just about loving the people who loved us, but it was actually a revolution of love that could only go forth if people agreed to love the people who were the least kind. Love the murderers. Why does he pray for their forgiveness? I also think people need forgiveness. I listened to one theologian who said God's greatest accomplishment, arguably the work of the cross, is our greatest need. We don't talk about it a lot because we don't want to live in our guilt. But I've been getting a little cozy with my guilt as I'm discovering my complicity with things that just aren't okay. And somehow, you guys are way ahead of me. You can just stay, but I'm not ready. Give better instructions next time, Pastor Karen. also think he wanted to model forgiveness for us. And he invites us to be in the fellowship of the forgivers. And then what's this bit? They don't know what they're doing. What's that part about? You could argue that maybe the religious leaders did know what they were doing. They were looking for false witnesses. They were trying to make sure Jesus was no longer a problem, no longer threatening their power or their influence. So some would say that he wasn't actually praying for the religious leaders. But he could have been. He definitely was praying for those who were nailing him to a cross, who were mocking him. And there's two possibilities that would help us understand they don't know what they're doing. They either don't know the identity of the criminal, and later we discover one of them says, truly, this was the Son of God. They just didn't know. They did resurrections every week. I mean, not resurrections, crucifixions every week. It was their job. They just were doing the job. But they may not have known the enormity of their crime. There's a verse in 1 Corinthians that says, had they known, they would have not crucified the Lord of glory. So I really didn't want to should forgiveness on everybody today. I didn't want to do a guilt trip about who you've forgiven or who you haven't. But I do think there's clues in here that can help us. And I do think that offering forgiveness to someone does not mean forgetting. I'm more convinced of that than I was. I've heard that before. But if forgiving is really about letting go, it doesn't mean you run back into a bad situation. Many people have said that we offer forgiveness not because it's earned by the person who's wronged us, but only because we deserve peace. And we can't have it until we begin to let go. So from Jesus's expression on the cross, I think the invitation for us is when you are trapped by unforgiveness, start by praying for them. That's what Jesus did. He said, Father, forgive them. Start praying that the Lord would forgive them, because that might happen before you are really ready to let it go. Then I think we also see here in this sentence some empathy. We talked about that weeks ago. We said start with empathy in your relationships. Try empathy. They don't know what they're doing. What isn't that person understanding? Is there something that they would actually be open to hearing from you? Or is the communication lost and out forever? And that's not a pathway to healing. Maybe they don't know the enormity of the hurt that they've caused. Just like these folks didn't know the enormity of the crime or the one whom they were executing. And then thirdly, we see Jesus focus on a bigger picture. Even from the beginning, this scripture happens after he's been captured in the garden. He says, but how then would the scriptures be fulfilled that say it must happen in this way? Jesus knew, and this is another thing I haven't been convinced of until now. Jesus knew what was coming. Jesus knew early on that Psalm 22 was his destiny and that he would hang upon the cross. You almost wonder, as he learned Psalm 22, how old was he and where was he in his ministry when he received the word that that was his future? We remember that Jesus kept his scars. After the resurrection, Jesus had scars in his wrists, and he was able to show them to Thomas, who couldn't believe unless he touched the scars. And it reminds us that we carry our scars too. And it's okay not to hide them. It's okay that they're part of our stories, and it may actually be because of those scars there's healing for someone else. If you feel like God is speaking to you, I want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. We are a community. We're growing together. We have small groups. We have a ministry called Celebrate Recovery, and it has alliteration: hurts, hang-ups, and habits. And it's a place where people find community and they don't hide their scars. You can meet with me. I was able to meet with someone last week, and she shared some scars. And we came to, I hope, more healing for her life. I read an author named Cole Arthur Riley. She wrote this beautiful book called This Here Flesh, which talks about forgiveness. And she talks about forgiveness coming to her, not something she conjured forth, which is, I think, what we're seeing in this text. This is what she says. Forgiveness came to her not in a dramatic flourish or sudden comprehension. Rather, it grew on her as slowly and fatefully as the fingernails crowning her hands. You participate in it. It comes from you, but it also is something that happens to you without you necessarily noticing. I think this is okay. Jesus invites us to come close. And Jesus invites us, even before the garden, we see Jesus invited his friends and his disciples to a table. And he shared a meal with them. And he took a loaf of bread. And just like you might at a family meal or out with friends, he blessed it. And then he did something they never anticipated. He broke it. And he said, "This is my body. It's for you." And if you're here today and you haven't received his body with us, I want you to know that you're welcome to. This is for people who want to know Jesus and to know him and to love him. And he also took the cup after supper. It was the after supper cup. And he said, "This is the new covenant in my blood. Something new is happening, and I am providing forgiveness in a way that will set you free." So as a Christian church, we have a practice of remembering Jesus just like he told us to, and rehearsing this supper where we remember that Jesus gave not only his wisdom, not only his passion, but his very body for our forgiveness, so that we could be new, made new again, so that we could be with him.